Alright, what's up guys? It's Jarvis here, back with another review for me now. Finally, I'm doing a movie. I don't know if I guess I've sprinkled in a few here, but this is a movie that is part of my all-time favorite list. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I know a lot about this subject, and today we're going to be talking about Howard Stern's only feature film, Private Part. Essentially, this is an autobiography of sorts. Not the most accurate story and depiction of stuff, but it's meant to be a Hollywood version of the Howard Stern rise and how he got into the radio, how he basically was able to become the king of media. In my opinion, I think he is the king of media. And maybe in some ways, this video might just be a vessel for me to talk about Howard Stern because, you know, being in the year 2025, there is obviously still pockets of community of people who really love Howard Stern, but it is nowhere the same, and I feel like I really miss the heyday. So for me, for Howard Stern, I always grew up with probably whatever all the fans look at as like the shittiest version of Howard Stern, which is him on that awful America's Got Talent show. My parents watched it, I watched it with them, and I remember asking about, like, who's this Howard Stern guy? I never really got his character. He just kind of seemed like a dick on that show. Funny things to say, but he, honestly, if you want to know anything about Howard, that is like the worst embodiment or understanding about Howard. It is like him trying to rub noses, pun intended, with a bunch of Hollywood elitists, and basically, essentially, to me, kind of sold out at that point. But after that, I didn't really think about Howard Stern for many years. Maybe a few clips would pop up in here and there, but it was always new clips of his show. And then probably about two or 3 years ago, I remember finding some compilations on YouTube of some classic Howard Stern, and that was really where the love has kicked off. Howard Stern, to me, is just one of those amazing, unique, incredibly talented media guys that are, to me, like one in a million. Like, you don't get anyone else like Howard Stern. And obviously, probably the next thing you're going to bring up is the problematic nature of a show, which I don't disagree with. There is so much shit, especially over, I think, roughly like 40 years of radio and morning shows. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of stuff that is dated, offensive, and no longer a viable joke or thing to be making fun of. But I don't really look at him, I don't really go to his media to get like a great moral, to feel better about myself, to get a good education about things. For me, it's pure entertainment. In a lot of ways, I think it encapsulates the time that those are the jokes that were being said. That was what was funny. And obviously, not all of it's great, but I think there's 10 times more stuff that is absolutely hilarious. I think also for me, I feel like I'm someone who is provocative in a lot of ways, and I feel like a lot of my media heroes are people who are quite provocative, and Howard Stern is probably the king of being provocative, especially with his show. To me, it's always amazing that he ran this radio show every day for years and years and years. I think it was like 3 to 4 hours every morning from like 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. It is absolutely nuts that he is able to continue to make his show so entertaining, so listenable, where like so many of those people, it's like this hot moment that they have for maybe a few years, and then it's just garbage. But with Howard Stern, and I think also too, it's that recurring cast of characters that he was able to bring along. Obviously in this movie, we'll get into it more, but people like Robin, Fred, Jackie the Joke Man Martling, John the Stutterer, Gary Delabate, Baba Booey, that I think Howard was able to create such gold, and for truly in a lot of ways, and I don't know if I'm completely off my rocker here, but I think in a lot of ways he's an American working class hero in the way that he has entertained more people at their shitty, mundane jobs than any other motherfucker. He is able to, you throw this on at work. I've listened to Howard Stern endlessly at work, and it is something that will keep you going through the day, keep you laughing, keep you in a good mood, and that is, to me, such a very important figure. But other than the introduction, let's get into Howard Stern. I could talk about Howard Stern for forever. I know I annoy my friends with how much I can go on about different bits and stuff from the years. But essentially, this movie came out in 1997. And if you know anything about the radio show, at this time when they were filming this movie and doing the production of this movie, apparently I'm not that old, but apparently it was like non-stop private parts movie talk, and apparently a lot of fans got quite turned off by that. And I think a lot of fans were kind of probably been like, this movie's just gonna be shit. If he's ruined his basically radio show or ruined kind of the more entertaining parts of his radio show, this could be over. But obviously, if you know anything about the 2000s era of Howard Stern, that's probably my favorite era. In a lot of ways, I love Artie Lang. Sadly, not in this movie because he wasn't even on the show. He might have did a guest appearance with Norm, or yeah, I don't even remember. But essentially, what this is the origin story slash autobiography of him. So it starts when Howard's young, going into his parents, how his parents treated him, which I thought they were excellent. Whoever they casted, because if you've part of the show, you know that the parents have called in a lot. There's infamous tapes of Howard's dad yelling, "Shut up! Shut up!" And the guy who played him in this movie perfectly executed that. I also thought, to me, the director was Betty Thomas, who really, if you look at her discography, is not great. But I thought she did an excellent job with this film. This was, to me, her most unique film that she made. This was something that was, in a lot of ways, definitely controversial. Like, Howard Stern has always carried around controversy with him, and for her to make this film was a risky move. But I think it also kind of looked somewhat better that it was like a woman directing this, and it didn't have this like Animal House vibe. But I thought she executed this really, really well, especially the look of it. And obviously, by the time they reach college years, that is basically when Howard Stern's like, yeah, it's just going to be me for the rest of the movie and just a regular crew, which I thought was a great decision. Howard, to me, is such a unique character. If you know the movie Fisher King, by Terry Gilliam. That movie is, a lot of ways, was supposed to be based off Howard Stern, and I thought actually Jeff Bridges kind of did nail somewhat of a Howard Stern impression. But for me, Howard Stern is such a unique character, such a unique voice, that like it would have been so weird if it was a completely different guy who was trying to, resemble and recreate some iconic Howard Stern moments. And really, too, a lot of ways, this movie is a love story. This is a love story between him and his ex-wife, Allison, which you will probably leave this film feeling a bit different. The ending might not work as much if you know the true story of their marriage and how it ended. Obviously, what he said, it was alcohol and everything like that. But it does seem like it kind of cheapens it a bit, because I think the biggest thing that I think what brought people that might not be a Howard Stern fan or really might hate him is that you get to see kind of an insight to his relationship with Allison. Because I think the biggest thing that probably everyone asks is, how would a wife or a girlfriend put up with what he says? And the segments he has on the show, having lesbians in, kissing, making out, doing all this shit. How do you have a wife? How do you go home? And he also has kids too. But I think what the film does really well is still portray that, and in not a way, but still keeping uniqueness to it. It doesn't feel like this like really boring, basic like love story or marriage that's like anything like that. Because you do really see some scenes where he's saying some really, really racy stuff, especially stuff that would, if you were married to someone, you wouldn't want to be hearing. And there's kind of, I don't think that was a real moment, but that's kind of one thing I always wondered with Allison, is just like what was going through her mind through a lot of this. Did she just have to like, maybe I could do more research on it, but like, did she just have to like pretend it didn't exist? Did she have to hear it from her friends? I imagine she did. And you could definitely see the toughness of it. The woman who played Allison also did a great job. Mary McCormick, I thought she absolutely nailed it from what I've heard. I've only really heard Allison, I've seen a few pictures of her, but I've really only seen her talk when Howard has called her up on the show or something like that. But she does a great job. She has a very sweetness to her. She's obviously someone who's very empathetic towards people, which I find interesting about Howard Stern. He always seems to love very like empathetic women. Like, if you know anything about Beth, she's like big into animal rescue and puppies and all that kind of stuff. And Allison was someone who worked with schizophrenic people who had disabilities and mental hospitals, things like that. So I think he always has this soft spot to him that I think a lot of people don't see. A lot of people just see this dick who's willing to say anything, get you going, get you all heated up or whatever. But next, what we really got to talk about, and to me, why I think the Howard Stern show doesn't work for me as much now, because in a lot of ways, the Howard Stern show it's a shell of what it is. He doesn't even show up to the studio. I don't even know if Robin shows up to the studio. All those guys that were on the show and that were great 20 years ago are still hanging on and are just like kind of old and embarrassing and are just sucking up to Howard even more than they already were. And I think the biggest thing is Howard doesn't have an enemy anymore. And that is where I think Howard is the fucking king. When Howard has a enemy and he wants to go after that enemy, he fucking goes in and he is going to make it the entertaining, funny ass shit you'll ever hear. And that's when we get into, I believe, one of his first performances, and that is Paul Giamatti as Pig Vomit. Essentially, his job was to basically keep Howard in line, and that's the thing that I think a lot of these executives have felt this big disconnection, that he is not a typical radio personality, that he does stuff that all these other radio personalities are too afraid to do. But at the same time, what they think was going to happen is that it's only going to cause blowback, advertisers pulling out, and the show end up failing. But what Howard Stern was able to do was do this and actually increase his audience. They even have a thing where they say, like, yeah, people who love the show listen, like the average radio listener listens to 15 minutes of a radio show, but the average Howard Stern listens to like an hour and a half. And then they say, well, what about the people who hate him? The people who hate him listen to it for an hour and a half. Like, everyone, you can't escape it. You just have to listen. You have to hear it from the man himself. And the soundtrack through this movie is excellent, and it kind of makes sense. It's this like 60s, basically 60s to 80s classics that you would hear on the radio. You know, had some Aerosmith, Jimi Hendrix, you know, some of those classic 70s rock outfits. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I think is so impressive in this film is how they're able to play themselves, especially Fred. Fred is like basically the secret, the guy hidden behind the curtains. Like, obviously he's on the show a lot, but he is a comedic genius. The way he's able to use sounds, also just when he talks, he's hilarious. His impressions are amazing, and I think he did an excellent job in this movie. Same thing with Robin too. She does a great job. She does have to do a little bit of kind of more acting, right? Whenever she ends up getting fired for a bit by Pig Vomit. But let's talk about that scene. And I think for me, in a lot of ways, not to say the ending is cheap, because it kind of got cheapened by real life. But I feel like the scene when Howard finally confronts Pig Vomit, which you can actually listen to the original audio on YouTube of like the actual Pig Vomit, and it was actually pretty good how accurately they made it and still made it very funny. But Paul Giamatti he's brilliant. Like, this showcased how great of an actor he was. And the thing I respect the most about him too, same thing with like Seymour Hoffman and a lot of actors. I can't fucking stand the 10 out of 10 model who's acting, because I think a lot of ways a lot of people will usually excuse bad acting, especially if the person's hot or they might have like a subversive crush on them. But think about Paul Giamatti. He's not a typical average looking guy. He's a unique look. He did not typically what we would call handsome or anything like that, but he fucking throws down. I think he's also kind of short. I'm a short king myself, so nothing wrong with that. But he does a fucking amazing job. His freakouts are absolutely hilarious. You'll be enjoying them along the way. And this just really just set him up for an amazing career that he has gone on to have. And maybe if he didn't have this opportunity, he would not have been the actor he ended up becoming. So overall, I highly, highly recommend this film. I do have a few issues with it, but overall, I'm going to give this a 95 out of 100. I highly recommend it, and I think to me the best part about this is, even if you don't know anything about Howard, or you know the bare minimum about Howard, America's Got Talent Howard, this is a great way for you to figure out and learn the idea of who he is. You can get a really good approximation of who he is. His comedy, his bits are littered throughout here, and this is going to be a great way, especially if you're trying to introduce Howard Stern fans or you're interested in Howard Stern. I highly recommend you go check out this movie, and thank you guys so much for watching.